back to another What If History. As you probably know, I'm Grace Costello, and today we're going to be talking about the Enigma machine. What was the Enigma machine? Well, in 1918, the Enigma machine was invented by Dr. Arbor Scherbius, who was a German doctor, obviously. Anyway, the Enigma machine had an electromechanical router mechanism that scrambled 26 letters of the alphabet. And so basically what happened was when one person typed text on the Enigma's keyboard, the other person would look at the letters, the lights that popped up after on the key that was pressed. And so once the plain text was entered, the lit up keys were called ciphertext, and this ciphertext was transformed back into regular text. And so every day, for like safety measures, I probably shouldn't be saying like in this video, but that's okay. For safety measures, it'd be checked and changed every day based on new advances and just new like lists of keys and stuff like that. And also the receiving system has to know exactly like where and the settings that the transmitting station was on, so it was very difficult and like honestly smart system. And so it gave the Germans a lot of advancements during World War II. They thought Enigma was an unbreakable code. There was one time a Poland spy actually got a message, and the Germans did a bit of research in that, but they didn't think anyone would really be able to break their code, so they didn't do much in terms of research about people who like were gonna break it. So eventually a guy named Alan Turing, who was working for the Allied forces, worked in a government coded cipher school at Bletchley Park, where he devised a team that would break the German Enigma code. What the Enigma code, the cracking of the Enigma code did was it shortened the war by at least 2 to 4 years. It allowed the Allied forces to be able to intercept German messages and stop invasions. A lot of victories by the Allied forces would not have happened if it wasn't for the Enigma code being cracked. Now you probably are all wondering, how did the Germans not notice that the Allied forces had cracked their code? Well, as I said before, they thought it was an unbreakable code, so they didn't think that anyone would be able to, so their pride kind of got the best of them. Some historians claim that the Enigma code actually prevented the death of 14 to 21 million people. And I said before, it ended the war 2 to 4 years earlier. I'm going to show you a picture of what the Enigma machine actually looked like. I know it's not brand new technology, it's pretty old, but it was really good for today, so that's what it actually looked like. As you can see, that's where they would type in and the transmissions. And so, yeah. Now let's say the Allied forces didn't crack the Enigma code. So that would have been, the Allied forces would probably have still won, since the Enigma code, even after it was broken, before the Enigma code was actually broken, Allied forces still won a lot of battles. So it's most likely that the Allied forces still would have won. But to say that the Germans actually discovered that the Allied forces cracked their code, sorry, I'm spinning on this chair a lot, just ignore that. To say that the Germans actually found out would mean that more bad results would have happened than just the Enigma code not ever being cracked. Most likely the Germans would have sent fake messages and other things to their forces, but just as a ploy for the Allied forces to see, which would have resulted in a lot more death and chaos for the Allied forces. And so that would have been bad. It would have led the war on for a lot longer of a time. Eventually, the Germans would have come up with a new code, and eventually that probably would have been broken. But by that time, the death toll would be so extreme, and the war would have been too long that people would have become so impatient, and it would have grown into a whole new war that just, cause since it was going on so long, more people would probably have gotten involved, and so eventually, after everyone being so tired of everything, not the Europeans, I'm stupid, I'm sorry, the Allied forces would have called for a surrender by the German forces, but because Germany was so adamant with what they wanted, and I think that they thought they had more to lose in terms of if they surrendered. So they wouldn't give in to that surrender, and I think it would have become a nuclear war, like how everyone today is fearing World War III. I think World War II would have become some sort of nuclear war. The Allied forces would have probably bombed Germany. And then, of course, I don't think Germany would have given in. They would have bombed the Allied forces right back, probably going with, like, a bigger target, like Great Britain or some other place. And eventually it would just come into such chaos and a nuclear war would just sprout out. Which, nuclear war would have a ton of negative impacts on the world, and not just like the European countries, but like the Americas, Africa, even Australia, maybe not Antarctica, but I mean probably a little bit. And it wouldn't just affect people, it affect the wildlife, it affects pretty much everything. Hiroshima, after Truman decided to put an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, not only were lives lost, but infrastructure ruined, and that the city hasn't really ever been able to recover to what it used to be. And it's still talked about. It's still like something that was such a serious event that it's still, people still fear it happening. So if the Enigma code, if the Germans had discovered that the Allied forces had cracked the Enigma code, and the war had continued on so much longer, and the death toll had been so much greater, and just the advancements of also the nuclear weaponry would have led to nuclear war. So for the next 100 years after, even if the nuclear war only lasts for a few years, 5 years, the effects would be so great, we would still be able to see it today. It'd be like starting from, not exactly base zero, but it'd be like we were starting in the 1800s and had to figure out everything from there. We'd still have some of the technology. Well, we'd have all the technology, but we wouldn't have time. Like, this iPad would not be invented, most likely, because why would anyone focus on creating an iPad when half the world's in chaos? You know what I mean? We'd be more focused on making new cities, trying to get back the plant life, the animal life, even the people life. There'd be people who still, I mean, a few years after, people obviously would be dealing with radiation poisoning and burns and stuff like that, so we'd be more focused on that. It'd be like total war. So let's go to 2040, which is about 100 years later. 2040. Okay? Oh, it's backwards. Oh my god, that is so inconvenient. What would our world look like? It would probably look like no forests, nothing. I mean, yeah, of course some forests, but in the areas near places that were bombed, there wouldn't be any forests, no trees, no pretty birds singing. It'd be awful. Okay, so just to give you guys a better understanding of what nuclear war would look like, we're gonna go to the map. So I'm not as cool as John Green. I don't have that fancy technology. Oh my god. Okay. So here's my fancy dancy globe. Okay, just so you guys can see. So, here, where is Germany? Okay, so you guys know that this area right here, that's Europe. Okay, and right here is Germany. So let's say Germany was bombed, like this area of Germany was bombed. And then Great Britain was bombed. And it just turned into total war or a nuclear war around, let's say it stayed in Europe. Eventually it would reach Russia. And the devastation effects, let's say they bombed right here. Sorry. The effects would land right here, too. And eventually every area would become affected with nuclear radiation and all the problems that come up with nuclear weaponry. The United States would get involved, as we always do. So if the United States got bombed, let's say they bombed like, maybe, no, they'd probably go for like, let's say they bombed Maryland, why not? Then everything around here would be destroyed. Not that big of an area, but the map's too small for me to do that. But the United States would be thrown into chaos, just along with the rest of the world, and we have a lot of nuclear weapons, so that'd be bad. And new forces would probably join each other's sides, like, Germany would get new alliances, from other countries, so it would just continue longer. I think the Allied forces would eventually win, just because of the larger amount of nuclear weapons in Allied countries. But yeah, so if you could see, this entire world would be affected. Because every little country that got involved would have some type of nuclear reaction. Not reaction, but like, be affected by the nuclear war in some way. Okay, now we're going to go to the secret compartment. Okay. Let's look at the effects of nuclear war. Give me a second. You know, they didn't have iPads back in this time, so I'm sorry if this takes a while. Okay. Sorry, it's loading. Okay. Okay, so let's draw, here's a nuclear bomb. Well, I'm really sorry. And then it goes to one city. Right? So basically that city goes, and it goes up in flames. Let's say it's like a pretty good sized city, so 1 million people die. 1 million people die. Okay, that's just one city. Now, the country that was bombed would bomb another city. But we're not even looking at the forests around that city and the rivers and all the animals. So these would be wiped out, vaporized. Great. Okay, and so would the birds, the animals, and the animals and birds that were not vaporized immediately would suffer through radiation and burns and all the other things. So a bunch of other animals would die as a result. Obviously, the animals and people and plants closest to the reaction would be vaporized immediately, most likely, but the animals farther away would suffer from other things, and so that'd be a loss of wildlife, food sources, so many things that even with all the human population dying, we would have such a lack of resources, we wouldn't be able to live like the way we do now. So people would die, animals would die, plants, trees, infrastructure. We'd have to regain everything. So here's a city, right? Here's a city. After the bombing, the city does not look like that. The city maybe looks like this, and then a bunch of rubble, and then the mountains still stay. So those are the cities after that. I'm sorry for the bad drawing. I never said I was an artist. And so then, what would we do? Right? What would we do if we have no resources, no people? Well, all these are exaggerations. Obviously, we have some. But, I mean, most major cities would be lost. And even once the war was over, let's say there was a peace treaty that was signed. The Europeans still figured it out, and Germany lost, and well, Germany would be in ruin, but so would the rest of Europe and most of the world. So what would we do? Right? It would still, the world would be in chaos. All the governments would be going crazy. All in all, the solving of Enigma by the Allied forces ended the war, cut the wartime in half, and saved so many lives. But if the Germans were able to discover, if they would get past their pride and the idea that the Enigma code was unbreakable, and they had found out that the Allied forces were able to crack their code, the war would have ended much differently and would have taken twice as long, if not 3 times as long, would have resulted in many more deaths by not just soldiers, but also civilians and all across Europe and Asia and pretty much most continents. And it would end in nuclear war. And nuclear war would have devastating effects on the entire world for so many years. And just how climate change is affecting us today, our wildlife would be so much different. Our forests, it's just our entire environment would be changed. And all the technologies we see today, all of our advancements would have been stalled before they could happen, because we just wouldn't have the time or the money to spend on research for those things when our world was in chaos. All the governments would be in chaos. So yeah, if the Germans had discovered that the Allied forces had cracked Enigma, we would not be where we are today. And the world would be completely different. So that would not be great. So thanks for watching. That was another episode of What If History. I hope you come back next week for summer vacation. Not another video. Unless you want one for extra credit. Anyway, thanks for listening about Enigma.